Good afternoon. I'm David Plazas, the Opinion and Engagement Editor for the Tennessean. We are so pleased here to have Zulfat Suara, who is a candidate for at-large Metro Council member, and we have Maria DeVarine, Executive Editor of the Tennessean. This week, the Tennessean is doing a public service in the community to introduce you to the leading mayoral candidates and also the at-large Metro Council candidates. This is for the August 1st election, and today we're going to discuss an array of city issues of what's affecting Nashville and why she's running for office. So thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Well, tell us, why are you running for this office?
I'm running for a number of reasons. The first reason is I'm a CPA by trade. I worked as an auditor with KPMG for some years, and right now I'm the assistant controller at Meharry. And for about 16 years, I had my own CPA practice. And in that time, I had contract with 4 county government and 2 city government. And so I felt that if there's a way to give back to Nashville, I wanted to use my professional experience to be able to give back. And the conversations for the last couple of, about a year or two, is about the budget. So I feel as a CPA and somebody who has worked with county governments that I can add meaningfully to that conversation. The other reason is that I'm an MMPS parent and I see the state of our schools and what needs to be done in the schools. So I figured, I'm in tune with what's going on. I have the CPA background, and Nashville has been so good to me. If there's a way to give back to this city that I love so much, let me use my experience and my knowledge to do that.
Very good.
Some people have said both the mayor and the council should be more involved with the school district in whether it's the chief, the school district head, or even down into what's happening in the classrooms. Can you talk to us a little bit about the changes you would like to see at the district?
I like the separation of the governance of the school and the council, and I don't think that the mayor should take over the school. I do know that a lot of people want more information, more transparency, more detail to the school budget, and I think you can accomplish that when the school comes in for their budget hearing. Also, as citizens, I think that council members, the mayor, have the right to meet with city council people, school board people, to ask them what's going on. So I think the oversight should be limited to asking questions when they come in for the funding, getting the details of it, and also following up as citizens afterwards. For me, one of the reasons why I want to focus more, one of my platforms is increasing funding for the schools. And I choose that because I see that there is inequitable funding in the schools. I'll tell you that, for example, my kids go to a school that don't have enough textbooks and they don't have enough computers. And so we have a school in Nashville where there's not enough computers in the classroom, where they have a computer cart going from one class to the other. That's something that should not be happening. Unfortunately, that school is in the zip code with the highest incarceration rate, 37208. So most of these kids don't have computers at home. And some of them live in districts that don't even have a library. And so for me, funding the schools and making sure the schools are allocating it properly is a priority. And it's something that we need to do, we must do. But that does not mean that we take over the daily operations of the school. I don't think the council should do that. The separation is needed. I always like division of labor, but there's an oversight in what's going on, but not taking it over.
Thank you.
Because you've talked about your experience as a CPA and your financial experience, I wanted to ask you about your impression about how the budget cycle went this year. There was a Metro Council budget that failed, and by one vote, the mayor's budget automatically went into effect, and we learned today that there are new raises for teachers based upon some reworking of the budget.
That's good.
From your standpoint, how do you see this process? Do you think it's a healthy process? Did you have any concerns about it?
One of the things that I'm proposing is something called a community-based budgeting. That's one of the things that I have as my platform. And I think that the process of putting together the budget is not as open and transparent as it should be. I think a lot of people don't know what's going on. I don't think there's a lot of information out there. You have a few council people that do it, but it's not on a global basis. Some do it and some don't. I think we need to have a better mechanism of making sure people know what's going on. In terms of the budget itself, my take on it is that the budget that we passed, nobody should be celebrating that budget. Because I think as a city, it's a loss. I know some people that don't want their property taxes increased. I get that. But we have to look into how do we fund our teachers, how do we fund our schools. So what I would have loved to see happen is an adjustment wherein even if we do increase the taxes, we make some provisions to be able to help those that cannot pay the property taxes, make sure that they can get relief. That's what I would have loved to see happen instead, because we're just pushing forward something that needs to happen inevitably.
And just a quick follow-up, this budget was based upon a parking solution that currently doesn't exist and hasn't been passed. As a CPA, obviously, you need to work with money that exists. How would you use your expertise to focus on addressing these budget issues?
Well, the way I explain to folks is that anytime you're doing a one-time fix, it's not the best solution. You may have plugged it this year, but what happens next year? And then as we've come to find out, if the parking meters we don't go through with the contract, then there's a big hole. How do we solve that? And so that is why I think in looking at the budget, in looking at what needs to be done, we need to be looking at long-term solutions. We need to be looking at sources of additional revenues. We need to be looking at our property taxes, not just once every 8 years, but looking at it more regularly so that the impact is not on the people all at one time. And so we find ourselves in a bind because there are things we should have done that we didn't do to date. And so the parking meter and the sale of property is something that I don't think is a wise decision. I tell everyone that when you have to sell your house in a rush because you need to move, you're going to go to the highest bidder without looking at whether it's actually the best thing for you, maybe not even the highest. You go to the first one you get so you can just make ends meet. Rather, when you have more time, you look at it, make a decision, is this best for us? Is this the best way to go? I don't think we did that in this case. And so planning ahead, making sure that we're looking at things, our budget and the issues ahead of the budget, talking to the community, making it a long-term process rather than a 2 to 3 month process, I think will be better for us as a community.
Thank you.
So Nashville continues to grow at a very rapid rate. And some people say the city's headed in the right direction. Other people say we need to slow down some of the growth. What is your position on that?
Growth is a good thing. Growth is not a bad thing because you get your money from the growth. So growth is not a bad thing. What I would like to see is what are we doing with that growth? How are we using that growth to benefit the community? So now that we've done a lot of stuff in downtown, how do we make sure that the district that don't have a library gets a library? Because that's important for the kids that don't have things at home to be able to have a place to go. How do we make sure that the neighborhood that don't have a grocery get a grocery? What do we do with our sidewalks? Those are growths, right? And so you do want growth, but you just don't want the growth to be in one area. You want it to be a growth that benefits every part of the city.
You'd mentioned the zip code 37208, which has Germantown, but it also has Cheatham Place. And so you have some major disparities. You talk about in your questionnaire about a livable wage. How can you, if elected a council member, affect the discussion on minimum wage and livable wage?
I can do that not just as a CPA, but also as somebody that has experienced tough times. What we have right now in Nashville, our minimum wage, which is set by the state, okay, it was $7.25 in 2009. It's still $7.25 today. But the rent in the city is gone from $700 in 2009 to about $1,500 in 2009. So you have a situation where the cost of living keeps going up, but the people's wages is stagnant. And that's not right. So what you see in that situation is people are moving out, people are not happy, people have a lack of trust for the government because people are wondering what is happening with all the money. And so I think it's very important that we make sure that we pay our workers what they do. And I know that, yes, we may not be able to impact minimum wage. That's why I did not say minimum wage. That's why we say livable wage, right? Part of it is because your livable wage impacts you being able to pay your bills and have something else. You being able to get to your job, having a good transportation, you being able to have a house to live. That all impacts your quality of life. And since Metro is the third largest employer, my take is that if Metro takes care of its employees, Vanderbilt is the #1 employer. Between those two, a lot of people will be able to afford a lot of things.
In your questionnaire, you talked a lot about having an equitable city and being able to offer services and opportunities to everyone in the community, both in the suburb areas and also in the downtown core. Can you share some of your thoughts with our viewers?
Well, when you're talking about equity, basically you're saying that every citizens have the resources they need to prosper. Whether you're talking about equitable funding in the schools or even just people being able to live, equity is a big word, right? But it has to be intentional. You have to look at what are the needs of each area. What these schools need, it may not be the same as what that school needs. You may have the same school in the same zip code that have different needs. Same thing for our neighborhood. So we cannot just say we're going to just do sidewalks everywhere. Well, what about the ones that already have it? And so that's where equity comes in. What are the basic needs of each neighborhood? What are the basic needs of each schools? So what I was saying is that we cannot be an equitable city if we don't even know what the issues are. We have to know what issues impact each area before we can actually address it. The other thing that we have to make sure, in addition to knowing the issues, when we're talking about solutions, we have to make sure we have everyone at the table. Oftentimes when we're making decisions, you don't have all the stakeholders there. And whatever decision you come up with might be good for party A and B, but it's still leaving C out. So if we want to be equitable, first we need to know the issues. And two, we need to make sure we have everyone at the table. And we need to make sure that whatever solution we're having works for everyone.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
The Tennessean reported on a series of threats that was made toward you because of your faith. And recently you've received also a lot of positive
Yes.
feedback since that story came out. Could you talk a little bit about, we talk about Nashville, the welcoming city, Nashville, the city where 12 to 16% of people are foreign born, there are many different faiths. What has this taught you about Nashville, and as a Muslim woman, how has it changed the way that you perceive the community and maybe how the community perceives you?
It did not change my thought of Nashville. It's reinforced my thought of Nashville. So in 1999, 2000, there was a period there that my husband and I did not have a job in Nashville. My husband is a physician, I'm a CPA. And neither one of us had a job due to some circumstances that we're dealing with. But it was the people in Nashville, the people at KPMG, the partner that I worked with at the time, Eileen McGinn, that gave us loan. The lady that I was renting from allowed us to stay until we sorted out everything. You know, it was people that came and cooked for us. It was people that watched my kids and said, we know you guys have always been paying. We know something must be off. We're going to help you out. So from the onset, and we're talking 1999, I've always known Nashville people to be loving and kind. And that was reinforced this week. Because what happened after this whole thing started a while back, and I wasn't sure even if I want to put it out there. But since it came out, I'm glad that I did, because it's a weight lifted off of my shoulder. Mm-hmm. And Nashville responded. People have been calling, they've been texting, people see me and hug me, and people are saying, you don't have to deal with this alone. And I'm glad that, that's the Nashville that I love. That's the reason why I want to give back to Nashville. When I remember that experience, you see stories of CEOs that end up on the street. And you're wondering, how could they be CEO and then they become homeless? It could happen to anyone. And my story and my husband and my kids' story could be different if the people of Nashville did not step up and help us that many years ago. And so that's why I want to give back to Nashville. That's why I'm so much in love with the city. And that's why what happened reinforced to me how welcoming, how loving, how kind Nashville is. So that's what I've experienced. And I'm hoping that we can go further by actually electing a Muslim woman to the council. I think that will make a much more bigger statement than it already did.
Thank you.
When you are out talking to voters and residents, what are the top one or two things they tell you they want addressed in the city?
Livable wage is a big one. A lot of people feel they're being pushed out. A lot of people, and I think it's so difficult for people to see all the crane and the development and still wonder why they're not making it. And so being able to afford to live in Nashville, it's a big issue that is big on people's mind. And that includes being able to pay their rent, finding affordable housing. Transportation is another thing that a lot of people talk about. You sit in traffic now, you're thinking, oh my God, what's going on? And so those are very big on people's mind. And so if we can address livable wage, and we can address transportation, we address the housing, I think a lot of people will be very happy.
One issue near where you work is the Nashville General Hospital issue and the subsidy and the future of the hospital. You witnessed the process where it was nearly closed down, the inpatient center. What are your thoughts on how to proceed? We know that because it is the hospital that accepts everybody, there are some issues. There are financial issues that it goes through. What would be your philosophy in terms of recommending how to proceed with the relationship between the city and the hospital?
Can I plead the fifth? A conflict? The hospital does two things. The hospital takes care of indigenous people, which are people that are part of our community, which we are responsible for taking care of. And so for that reason, we need to make sure that it's open. But the other thing that the hospital also does, it trains physicians. And so the impact of it is actually beyond Nashville as well, because Meharry doctors trains at General Hospital, and those doctors goes to rural Tennessee to actually practice. So when you're talking about the impact of it all, we're talking about these kids that graduate out of it, the income and the potential they have to put back in the economy, as well as the patients that we actually see as well. And so I think it's important for us to fund General. When we don't provide those basic services, guess what happened? People go to the ER. And what's been told is that the cost of seeing a patient in ER instead of just the regular care is actually more. So that's why I think making sure we have a place for people to go will be very crucial. So I'm for that relationship.
Very good.
Another topic of conversation and sometimes controversy are the scooters. Can you tell us where you stand on the scooters?
You would not see me on a scooter, let's say that. The way that I see scooters is becoming something that people are getting injured by, where there's a lot of people that are being impacted. It's become a big problem. But I think ideally, if we could regulate it, if we could make sure, because we're talking about transportation and mobility, getting from one place to the other. We still have a huge transportation problem. And getting people from one source to the other has to be a very broad and encompassing solution. So scooters would have been a good way for me to park at the library when I'm going to Cordell Hall and be able to get there, right? And that would have helped a lot of people. But in the face of it, the regulation not being there, in the face of people being injured, in the face of people living it on the streets, then my take is if we cannot regulate it, if we cannot have some accountability, if we cannot hold these companies accountable to make sure that when they don't do what they're supposed to do, we fine them, we penalize them, we stop them, then we don't need scooters because it's a danger to our community.
And then a follow-up to that, and you touched on it, the need for a transit or transportation plan. Yeah. I know in 2018 the referendum was was not passed. What would you do to address the transportation issues in our community?
Part of what I've done, because my focus or my big platform is education, community-based budgeting, and livable wage, because I'm a number person, and I don't want to say that I have solutions for everything, which I don't. But what I've done is I'm part of a coalition that is putting together a transportation plan. It's called Nashville Transportation. They have a website. It's about 10 organizations. Walk Back Nashville is there. Connection America is there. They have some current council members, and they have some candidates. And they're looking into, let's have a broad transportation plan for the city. I like it because anytime that you have a coalition, you have different people bringing different thoughts. What you're going to end with is going to be something that a lot of people can buy into. I think the last one failed because a lot of people did not buy into it. But I think that as a short-term solution, we need to have increased bus routes, and we need to have increased number of buses. I think that's something we can do immediately that can impact a lot of people right away. while we're working on a long-term plan. So, but if we can increase the number of buses that is out there, if we can increase the number of times and extend their hours, I think that would help a lot of people in this community.
Thank you.
Next year will be the 10-year anniversary of the Great Nashville Flood, and there's still a lot of conversation about is Nashville prepared for something of that magnitude again? We've had conversations about the downtown wall, but there's also concerns about what happens if you flood neighborhoods like in Mill Creek and the Antioch area or elsewhere. What are the kinds of conversations, or what are the things that you've been thinking about in terms of how to mitigate floods in a place that rains so much like Nashville?
Honestly, I have not, and that's being brutally honest. But I do know that part of the issue we have is our infrastructures and looking at what we have out there now to improve them. And so some of the conversations that we've been having, or that people have been having in neighborhoods, is making sure that we have those flood drains, in making sure, and you hear a lot of that from the local candidates and the current council people, that our drainage is very bad. How do we make sure that we have those storm water stuff in the neighborhood? And I trust what they're saying as that being a solution. You don't want something that happened to happen again, so you need to have plans ahead of it. Do I have a plan put forward for that? No, I don't. But I do subscribe to the issue of making sure that we are preventive, or that we do things that prevent things from happening. That's where I will go with that.
Thank you.
The city has given economic incentives
Yes.
to companies to move into the Nashville area. Some people are in favor of them. Some people say we should not be subsidizing major corporations. What is your position on that?
My take is that when we started doing incentives, to start with economic incentives, it was during the Depression. It was a way to stimulate economy. My take is that anytime you're going into a negotiation for someone to come to Nashville, we should not be leading with incentives, because we're the place everybody wants to come to now. And so in economics, we always talk about demand and supply. There's a high demand. If you don't want to come, let somebody else come. And so when we negotiate those contracts, leading with incentive is not the right thing to do. But after having said that, I will also tell you that there might be situations where we do need a company or need somebody to come for whatever reason, and we do need to offer those incentives. You never say never. When we do that, then we need to have better accountability. We need to have better transparency. We need to be able to agree upfront to what are we getting for our money. If we give X amount of dollars, what does the city get back in return? What are the company investing back in return? And so I think it's important to have that. And then as part of it, if they did not meet those contracts, do we have a recourse? Do we have a recourse? Do you have a way to say, give us our money back, or what would you do back? That's one. The other thing that I also think is missing is that when we do negotiate this contract, oftentimes the community don't know more about it. So I think we need to let people know, this is what we're doing, this is what we're getting back. Bring people along as we're doing it. So my take is, if we don't have to, don't. But if we do need to, there has to be stronger accountability, and there has to be a way for us to see what we're getting. And if we're not getting it, there has to be a way to get our money back.
Building on the theme from last week's State of Black Nashville forum, which you and I both attended, there was the issue of whether or not the city would step up in terms of addressing minority contractors. As a Metro Council member, if you're elected, how might you be able to work with the mayor to assure that the necessary contracts are delivered?
I think that they started off Ashford Use, the small business program that the mayor's office has now. It's a very good start in making sure that we're encouraging small and minority businesses. And so with everything else that we're saying, I think the problem is when it's good to have good programs. If there's no enforcement, that's where there's a problem. And so my role will be to make sure that as we're looking at those contracts, making sure that everybody's complying with them, that it's actually for minority. How many businesses did we give? How many of them are minorities? I think those are questions that we need to look at, have a report from the agency in terms of what exactly did you do and how was it allocated. And so, but I think that was a good move in itself. if we can follow through with it, I think it would make a difference.
You talked a little bit in the beginning of our conversation about people being displaced and the core of Nashville having more amenities than some of the outlying areas. With that, we also find affordable housing being an issue in the core, and then people even in the suburban areas getting pushed out further. So what would you do to address affordable housing?
I think for affordable housing, we need to put more money in the bonds fund. I'm a proponent of that. I also believe that when we're talking about affordable housing, I like the conversation around mixed income. I think oftentimes what you've seen sometimes in the past is when we do low-income housing, they're concentrated in one area. And when you have concentrated poverty in one area, it's not good for everybody because then everybody knows that's where the poor people live. And that's not good. We should not be segregating ourselves like that. And so I would love to see whatever solution that we have has to include mixed income housing. The last thing is that, you know, when we have developers coming and they're trying to put up big buildings, or anybody that we're dealing with and giving incentives to, or anybody that wants to do business with us, we should be able to have a requirement to say, as you're putting up these big homes, make sure that you have some that people working in the downtown area but cannot pay such a high price can afford to stay in. So designate a percentage of it for people, a low income.
We're now at the conclusion of our interview, but we wanted to ask you if you would tell the viewers why should they vote for you, and tell them how to contact you if they want to learn more about you.
Thank you. Yes, I'm asking for your votes because I believe that I bring unique experience as a CPA to the council. But it's not just that. A good budget has to be very good in numbers, which a CPA does, but it also has to be very sound with the issues. Your money has to fund the issues that is important to the people. I've been a community organizer for about 20, 25 years. Many people know that I chaired the American Muslim Advisory Council, but I was also state president for the Business and Professional Women. I serve as a commissioner of the Metro Action Commission and on the Pencil Foundation. I've been on a number of boards that I cannot count. But the reason why I'm mentioning all that is because I'm in tune to the issues that are important to the people. And so your budget has to be financially sound, but it has to be your moral document. If it does not tie to the issues, then we have a lack of trust, which is what I think is happening now, where we're seeing the money, but the issues is not being impacted. So as a community organizer, someone that is in tune with the issues on the ground, and as a CPA, somebody who has worked with county governments and knows about government financing, I bring all of that experience to the table. I also bring the diversity of an immigrant, Muslim, Black woman, also to the conversation. And I think all of that is a complete package. As an MMPS parent, when I talk about the state of our schools, I'm not talking about something that I read or saw on TV. I'm talking about something that I witnessed. And so that's another thing that I bring to the table. And so I hope that all of that experiences, people will look at it in totality as being impactful in all the conversations that we have about things and how it goes on in Nashville. People can reach me through my website. It's zulfatsuara.com, ZULFATSUARA.com. We're also on Facebook, on Twitter, and all those social media. All of them. I don't know all of them. We can reach out through that. Phone number is 615-538-8686, and they can also email us.
Well, very good. Well, thank you very much. And we want to thank our...
And I want to add something.
Sure.
Because, I'm sorry, David. I need to remind people that when they're thinking about me and when they're looking for me, they should remember that it's Zulfat Z, as in zebra. It's very important because the name, some might not remember it, but if they can remember Z as in zebra. And so I ask for everyone's vote, and I hope I get the opportunity to be one of your council members.
Well, thank you very much, and we want to thank our viewing audience. Again, you can watch all these videos in their entirety on Tennessean.com, where you can also read about each candidate, the answers that we've been alluding to in their questionnaires. Remember that the deadline to register to vote is July 2nd. Early voting starts on July 12th, and your last opportunity to vote is on August 1st, Election Day. Remember that your vote is your voice. Thank you very much.